If you've ever heard the phrase, I can't work with these leads are no good. We can't get a hold of these people. Nobody wants to buy anything. These are the worst leads. Well, then you've tuned in to the right episode. I'm Chris Stilwell here with my co host Dan Baum, and you've just got into Stop Blaming the Leads. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of Stop Blaming the Leads. This is the podcast where we challenge the excuses, rethink the process, and help you build a generator business that actually scales up. So today we've got with us Jesse Rack, CEO of Rack Electric down in Boca Raton, Florida. Welcome to the show, Jesse. Why don't you give everybody a little quick intro?
Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it. We're a large independently owned Generac dealership here in Southeast Florida. Very big territory through mergers and acquisitions over the last few years. What I like to say is we're really focused in the energy industry. We have a solution to people's energy problems. And we are a turnkey process when it comes to automatic standby generators, as we have everything from electricians to gas to delivery of propane in-house. So we really feel that, we're best practices when it comes to the generator installation process.
Awesome.
Dude, what a great way to put it, Jesse. And do me a favor, tell people a couple of the awards that you've won from Generac just over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, we've been premier dealer for the last 5 years in a row. Just recently, we became a prestige dealer, which is the new highest level. Last year, we were the Impact Award winner, which was given out to one dealership in the entire network. So it's on year 3. We were the second winner of that from just overall excellence and doing the right thing on behalf of Generac, doing the right thing on behalf of Generac customers, the brand, the responsibility that we have as a contractor to do things the right way. As you guys know, a lot of the acquisitions that we did were dumpster fires. We kind of had to come in and save the day for guys that, had just kind of ran their businesses into the ground. Yeah. So, these awards are great. As I like to say, I can't do them without my great team. I can't do them without great coaching. So, I'm only as strong as the people that are around me and the processes that we have. But yeah, we've been very fortunate to, just grow into a really large independent dealership that's family owned and operated. And because we just want to be the best at what we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's great that like a guy like you, self-made guy, that you guys have got to this level, especially in such a what I would call a combative area of the country as far as generator sales are concerned. Can you tell us I want to get into a couple of things, but I just kind of want to give people the background. Your dad, John Rack, is a real well-known guy with a great reputation, and I know that you guys are real established down there. Can you tell people how he started the business and how you came into it? And I think it's a real great story. I think it'll kind of give a lot of people some inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I never really wanted to be a part of the business. Never grew up saying I wanted to be an electrician. I think at one point I wanted to be a fireman, which he was a fireman. And then I wanted to play in the NFL, and as you can see over here on my left shoulder or right shoulder, wherever it is in the view, we have a helmet with the Rack sticker on it. My passion was football. Football brought me to South Florida. I was coaching at Florida Atlantic University as a graduate assistant. And one thing kind of led to another, and my dad got sick, and I, was here with him at the Boca Raton Regional Hospital. And little did I know, probably at the time, maybe it was a panic attack, maybe it was anxiety. Running these businesses are really, really hard. You have to learn from the failures. And being self-made, it's not like, some of these organizations that have just copious amounts of money. I mean, we didn't have anything. We had a lot of heart and a lot of hustle. So, at the time when I started with my dad, he had built a really strong foundation, a really strong resume. People knew him for doing great work, but he never was able to scale it because it's one of those scenarios where you're trying to rely on your team, and he had several team members try to take his business,
Sure.
badmouth his business. I mean, this happens all the time. You think it doesn't. It's happening every single day.
Oh,
And, we just kind of, I have it here on my wall and I always look at it. I call it the plan or the movement. And I kind of built an organizational chart of what I thought RAC could be. And two of the things that I wrote at the bottom was be your own boss and create an empire. And that's what we've really done. And, one of my greatest strengths is recruiting. So I felt like I really recruited strong people around me. And that kind of helped grow from the million to 5 million to 10 million, all the way up to, 50 million where we're at right now.
So when you came in, which is ridiculous, so when you came into the business, what was the piece? Because I know you're also an electrician yourself too, as well, right? I don't think a lot of people. Master electrician. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people know that about you. Can you kind of talk about how you did that, and then also were able to get business training as well? Because what's interesting, and I just want to kind of bring this point up. A lot of people feel like if I'm in the trade or if I'm a trade person or this is what I do, that you're kind of limited to that, right? So then people see you and they see, oh, this guy must have gone to school for business and, had these huge aspirations from a young time. And it's like, no, like this dude's an actual master electrician. He could walk into, any room and plan that thing out. And I've seen a lot of the work that you guys have done. So kind of talk about like how those two things have come together for you.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I went to college to play football. I was fortunate to earn a Division I scholarship at the University of Buffalo. I tell people this all the time. I was born in Brooklyn, but I was built in Buffalo. We weren't a proven winner. We were like the bottom of the bottom when it came to Division I football, but we had a really strong core group of guys. And we had a mantra that was believe, and we were believing in what things we hadn't seen yet. So, through that learning curve, winning a championship in 2008 with that team, still the only championship team in the history of the school and the program, kind of really defined a lot of the things that I'm doing now. I took a lot what I learned from football, playbook wise, with recruiting and creating adversity and creating teamwork to the trades, and it wasn't easy, like I said, I took what my dad left me, which was a really strong foundation. And I kind of just looked at everything. And on the number side of things, I would say, okay, well, we do a lot of new construction, but if you really break down profit margins on a $200,000 job that you're supposed to make $40,000 on, and then divide that by 3 months, how much money did you really make? So I started to kind of say, you know what, if we're going to build a recession-proof company, we need to get into different avenues or different verticals within the trade. If you asked me then what I'm doing now, I probably would say, no, I never thought I'd be in the propane industry delivering propane.
Exactly.
I never thought I'd be an air conditioning contractor or building, EV Tesla sites all over the Southeast US. It just kind of matured as we kind of got let down by subcontractors that we try to work with. So it really just, it was a maturity level of, what we could handle. As I always felt, I would always put people to succeed. I'd put them in the best position to do a great job, and I would evaluate that talent. So, we never abandoned anything, right? So if we had great relationships in new construction, we would still focus on that while bringing in service. Okay. And, it just kind of evolved. Like generators, the only way I really got involved with generators, and the truth is that I would see all these really cool trucks driving around with this big box on it, and I felt like nobody was marketing it the right way. So to go back to my story is one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I was supposed to graduate in 2010, my academic advisor called me and said, hey, I made a mistake. You're 9 credits short. I'm like, what? I bought the cap and gown. Oops. I told my mom we were ready. Oops, I was in the middle of training for the NFL at that point, and I had to call my mom and tell her, hey, I'm not going to graduate. They made a mistake, but it really, the silver lining in all of it was I was able to get a minor in marketing, and I went back there, and at that time it was. Yeah, and at that time it was called viral marketing because social media really wasn't mainstream. But as you can see with social media, if you get the right thing, it'll spread like a virus. That's where the term viral marketing came from. Okay. And I really I loved it. I loved it. So Yeah, I tell people the story all the time. When I first got here, we had one truck. But when we had that one truck, people thought we had 10 because whether it was different photos or posting them at different times,
Yeah.
and then when we had 10, they thought we have 100. Now that we have over 100, they think we have thousands, So
I love it, dude. I love
yeah,
it.
man, it's really just chasing and following that vision.
So you combined, so then after that, you get out, you go, you become an electrician, right? And you're doing that. You go, you're working with your dad, you guys start building this company up. When do you and John look at each other and go, this is going to be a generator company? We're going to do generators. Like, when does that decision happen?
That's a great question. All right. So one, my dad was very keen on me getting the license. As you can see, and you've met a lot of people out there, most companies, the license holder is somebody they're renting it from. So my dad,
Yes.
being old.
Actually, let's go to that point, Jesse. Go to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, that license holder can strangle you, right? They can really cause a lot of problems with your business.
Knowledge is power. I always used to say
Yes.
that. And you can see behind me, I have, pictures of my family. I have the rack helmet. I've got all these books. These are all the tests that I studied for and passed.
Okay.
So again, my father was very keen on me getting my license, and
Okay.
I tried to do the school route, and I'm a big believer in the school. It was just hard for me as the son of the owner, who was also the estimator, who's also the service manager, to do all these things and then turn around at 5 o'clock and then go to school for 2 hours. I did school for 2 years. And then I began studying on my own. I bought the books online. I studied on my own. And once I hit my time limit, because I had enough on the job training, I went and I sat for the master electrician license. And I still remember that day, and I still have a little bit of a test taking congratulations. I go to McDonald's and I get a double cheeseburger.
Beautiful.
And I still remember that day when I passed that test. I was bawling, crying because I passed it by the skin of my teeth. And then that kind of just it got me like fired up, and I wanted to pass more. And then when I had issues with gas, like we talked about, I went and I got a gas license, and then I went and I got a solar license, So like right now I'm completing my general contractor license, because at the end of the day, if I hold all these licenses, number one, I'm a professional and I want to hold these licenses.
For sure.
Just like you and I always talk about, you're not a salesman, you're a specialist. Well, if I'm going to talk the talk and I'm going to walk the walk, I better have the license.
Oh, absolutely.
And on the other side, I'm a doctor of electric. I'm a doctor of gas. I'm a doctor of solar. These are things that I'm passionate about, and people are trusting me to take care of them and provide them that service. So I believe that kind of answers what you kind of asked me, right? Or did I go off on a wrong route?
No, man, that's the perfect. That's absolutely perfect answer, because one of the things that people don't realize that you've been able to do is that you've been able to actually purchase a couple of dying companies and been able to kind of like revive those customer bases, and even kind of like bail some of those owners out. I know you don't want to get into like the specifics about that, but could you talk about like maybe about like some of the acquisitions and things that you've seen have gone really wrong, and ways that you've been able to come in and kind of correct that path? Because I don't think a lot of people realize how bad things could get before you have to kind of get bailed out or quit, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, number one, I understand generators and gas. That's the difference between rack and most of the competition. So when looking at a generator business to purchase, we're looking at different metrics. We're looking at service contracts, how much work is to be completed, what kind of liabilities on the table. All of my purchases were all asset purchase agreements. So the liability stayed with the previous company. All we did was take their assets, do evaluation on them. But just like any deal, every single deal that we did, you learn something new every day. First
I've been around for a couple of them, and
you've been around for a few.
And we've gone through some stuff, right?
Yeah. So like the first one in 2023, I mean, out of nowhere, I get a phone call. On my way, actually, believe it or not, to Generac conference. One thing I always pride myself is, I am Jesse Rack. My name is on all my trucks. I do have a really good reputation. So when I got a phone call from somebody that needed help, they got my information from a supply house that I always paid my bills, and I always was looking at things in the cutting edge way. And I don't really pick up the phone for people that I don't know.
Sure.
But I'm getting this call and something's telling me answer the phone. And I'm looking, my wife's sleeping, my baby's sleeping in the back, and I'm like, hello. And happened to be a gentleman from a company that was having an issue, and two private equity companies kind of came in there and backed out in the 11th hour. And almost in a way, they all thought they were going to get bought up in bankruptcy and 301C, which is basically, I don't know how you put a valuation on a maintenance contract. These are people's houses and whatnot.
That's an interesting thing to say, and I think I come from the health club industry where it's like, you could easily put a valuation on a membership. The other thing is you have to also look at like attrition rates, and you have to look at what the market's reflecting, and the other difference too is like if you're bringing them in, are you going to increase the cost, right? So I think those are things you've had to take into account, right?
Yeah, and we had to. This was north of us. This is a little bit of a lower tax bracket. Prices were cheaper. I was familiar with this particular contractor because we had lost several deals to them because they always went in very tight on margins.
Undercut.
So to see where they were at, kind of, I guess, speaks volume, because I know what the value of our company is, which is why I built an energy company, not just a generator company. So the thing was, like I said, most people looked at it and they were scared. I looked at it, and because I understand, I breathe generators. I started to make calls, and I took a $2.5 million hit and I turned it into like a $1.5 million hit with $100,000 profit on the installation side, while also taking the $1.5 million of liability. And then because of my great relationships within the network, a lot of the people that were on the hook for that, they worked out deals with me. They instead of it going to bankruptcy and they got 5-10 cents on the dollar, I was able to negotiate anywhere from 15 to 20 cents. If it wasn't a very big number, I was able to say, look, write this off. Let's all be adults here. We all lose money. We learn. Don't have bad terms with other contractors. But what I can do with you is I can do business with you. I can get you referrals. I can get you other contacts. Wow. So some of those relationships have really grown during that time. But like you said, on other scenarios, you get owners that hide things. They disappropriate deposits. They don't have the units in stock, or they tell you the floor plan's empty and it's on a different on a different bank statement. So these are things that maybe the large private equity firms understand because they've done so many of these. But as an independent, we kind of had to learn the hard way. The only difference is it's only made me better at what I do when evaluating a business. Yeah. And I laugh, Chris and Dan, because at the end of the day, like, I've walked away from several businesses, and then I see somebody come in and buy them, and then I hear through the grumblings what a nightmare it was. I truly feel that it's like my sixth sense. I can just kind of like, hey, trust my gut. This is a bad deal. This place is in the middle of nowhere. The prior ownership doesn't want to walk away, or they want to tell you how things should be done, and that's not how this rolls. When we roll in there, there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new culture. There's new processes. There's software. There's no going back to the old ways. So
I love.
And you've been a part of some of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have, and what's interesting is that for you, I understand that it was, those acquisitions about growing top line revenue, right? And that's what you were, of course, worried about at that time. What's your thoughts now after acquisition? Are you still a guy who says, I've just got to get top line revenue up, or what's your indicating factor of what's going to be the most beneficial to your business?
Listen, at the end of the day, it's all about net profit, right?
Okay.
So top line's great, but you talk about experiences. I closed a solar business that was doing $23 million and was making no revenue. I'm in the business to make money, right?
Wow.
And as you're seeing the silver tsunami that's happening with all the older operators that are looking to get out, 9 times out of 10, they've just not taken care of their books. So the valuation's really, really hard to get on there. But, you could run a very small company, a $5-6 million company, and have a really good net, $1.5 million and sell that thing for $10-15 million.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey guys, I wanted to take a second here to shout out today's sponsor, which is Precast Pads. George and the team down there in Florida, they specialize in creating poured concrete pads that are customized with your logos, and they're great to just keep the flow of your installs going, so there's no more waiting around for concrete to cure up or anything like that. So Chris and Jesse actually talk about their experience working with the team down at Precast Pads in this episode. So let's hear what they have to say, and then we'll get back into the conversation with Jesse.
So Precast Pads is a fantastic pads company. They're based out of Florida, and I actually was introduced to George, the owner of Precast Pads, by Jesse Rack. Now, these guys, they're the hardest working guys around, and they have these really cool pads that are engraved with your own logo on them. And Jesse, can you talk a little bit about Precast Pads so the listeners can understand why you shop with them and why they should use them?
You know, George and I became really close back in 2023. We had already purchased pads from him, a lot of pads from him, and he was part of that acquisition process, and the company owed him a bunch of money. And I just, I sat him down. I said, look, I don't have this extra money, but what I can guarantee you is this: if you work with me, I can put you in touch with a lot of really great people, and I'll continually buy pads from you. And his team always delivers, right? I mean, custom pads, regular pads, all of our pads have Rack logos in them.
Yeah,
cool. And again, these are good people. They ship all over the country. I'm sure they can ship internationally. And whenever you have an issue, you just pick up the phone and they'll make it right. And George and his team have been awesome, and we're a big supporter of Precast Pads.
Awesome. So Precast Pads, check them out, guys. They're always at the TSSG events. They're going to be at TSSG Connect in Saratoga.
Now back to the episode.
2025, I always like to say this, it was a year that was really interesting for all parties. Number one, at Rack, we didn't get a hurricane here in the state of Florida or in the United States for the first time in 10 years.
Wow.
With generators being a main cog in our revenue and net profit, profit and loss statement, it was interesting. We had a great year. We didn't have the year that both you and I thought we might have.
Exactly.
And that's just the nature of the beast,
But that's just for new sales. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of people understand about this business is that, although sales, and you've always been known as the monster of sales, right? I don't think people realize how in depth you really are with service, and the guys that you built around you. I know the pieces of the guys. You got John, and you've got Eric, and you've got Chris, and a lot of other key pieces. Can you kind of talk about how that team that you have has taken service and got it? To how many? I don't want to say how many service plans you have unless you want to say
okay. I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'll
go
say
ahead.
it.
Yeah,
absolutely. So look, when I talk about the people around us, right? So
yes.
Alignment is really important. Why is TSSG on the same alignment? Well, the guys up at the top are on the same page, right? So for me, it was about surrounding myself with the right people. As the head coach or whatever you want to call it, I needed good coaches to then coach the members in the field, the players in the field. The players are the ones, to me, that are ones that make it happen. Your generator techs, your air conditioning techs, your installers. So, I looked at different things, and you look for certain individuals that have certain skill sets. On a general manager side, like a guy like Eric, great attitude, focused on making sure everybody's happy, everybody's bought into the culture. And that's what he does every single day. So when I'm not here or I'm out doing what I do best, which is making relationships and building that network, he's here running the show, working with operational. Now, John on the operations side, he really understands generators. So as that's a fully loaded question. What I would say is what I did is I was a student of the game, right? And I think that's something that's really lost. Yes. I don't want to necessarily say that back in the day everybody was buddy, but we had a really good alliance with other dealerships. And being the smaller guy, they obviously recognized me as a potential threat. But there was enough out there for everybody. What we did as owners, we had really good, strong agreements where we wouldn't take each other's guys because we know what it's like to invest into people and invest time and energy. But when it all kind of came to things and private equity rolled in, there was a lot of people that just weren't happy. So then I was kind of able to kind of build my team. So it started about 4.5 years ago, operationally, when I brought John in, and we started to sit down and make, what's our goal? And I said, I want to build $100 million business. you know, and I have it on my windowsill over here. And if you broke it down, it's $100 million is a year, but you got to do $8 million a month. You got to do $2 million a week. You got to do 273,000 a day. Like that's insane, you know, but you know, it's a goal for us to work towards. So we had to rebuild maintenance from the ground up. Right. We totally did. We had to build it from the ground up. We had no CRM, which you're familiar. We work with Service Titan. We had nothing. So we had to build this all from the ground up, which we did. And we took our time, where most companies are like, they're jumping into it too quick. They don't realize that if you spend the extra time building the software, by the time you're ready to launch it, it's so much better. So we took about a year building Service Titan. And, you know, from inventory in the warehouse to inventory in the trucks, you know, and there was different key players that are with us, not with us, that were all part of that. But John was the guru when it came to the maintenance side, and Eric was the guru when it came to the gas side, and Chris was just, you know, a Swiss Army knife that would do whatever. We have a great service manager that, you know, I always relate everything to sports, you know, like my service manager is like my defensive coordinator. We don't want to lose any contract.
Yeah.
Now through natural, now, you know, and I know through natural, you're just going to lose some contracts, but how many?
For sure. Attrition is attrition. Listen, dude, I was in health clubs, right? Like, you know, people would always be like, well, what do you do when people cancel? I'm like, I just sign up new people when they come in afterwards. Like you don't care about the cancels. You do the best that you can. And you always, you know, that's the other thing is like, you have to look at the business as, if you're running a good business and things are going the right way, you're not going to be losing contracts, right? You're going to get some. But I think for you guys, you know, you guys are at a point now where you're the big guy, right? Like you're the big guy in the area. And I know that you've done some stuff nationally now. I know you've got a couple businesses locally, but you've also started doing some stuff nationally when they at NASGD, right? And Jesse Adams and some of those guys. Can you kind of talk about how you've gone from where you are in Florida to kind of what you're going to do kind of nationally with this now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I truly feel is I've never wanted to be the biggest, Chris. I always wanted to be the best. And
the best. Love it.
You know, I learned a lot about that last year with maybe having too much personnel. And again, you know, having a great year revenue wise, but not making much profit. But on the other side of that, what I would say is that through those relationships and through winning those awards, being recognized, I was able to build a really strong network of dealerships that, you know, they're not really my competitors. I mean, like the truth is at this point in the game, I don't look at people like competitors. I'm a little bit more mature at that point. I try to build relationships. I try to build alliances. And what I had coming up is I had Big Brother to the north of me. I had Big Brother to the south of me, because we're in an area that got 6 prestige dealers in like a 15-mile radius. Now
that's insane, man. There's only like 25 prestige dealers. You know what
that's
I mean?
What I mean.
Like,
so I'm dealing with these guys all around me. So, you know, so with the NASGD, you know, what we felt like was, number one, the industry was really lacking support. Number two, generators was no longer this like part of electric and part of gas. And it's, you know, I mean, look, yes, nationally, you know, maybe it's 6.5%. I think here in Florida it's 8%. But the difference is that 50% of the people in Florida want them. That means there's a 42% gap to grow this industry. Huge. Right? And what I did feel, and my biggest push to them, was that I think generators, you know, dealing with all the different AI companies, Service Titan, for example, or Nexstar that we're a part of, and even dealing and working with you were so generator specific, but nobody else was. So like, for example, Service Titan, Nexstar, they have nothing geared towards generators, where they're now actually turning to us as best practices to say, well, how do you guys do it? How do you run the reoccurring? How do you run the reoccurring revenues? So I just happen to be, you know, look, I mean, a lot of it is a lot of luck through the acquisitions. You know, we grew our maintenance contracts around 10,000. It ebbs and flows, give or take. But it takes a lot. We've got 30 techs on the road. We've got 4 different locations. We're on call 24 hours a day. And I've probably failed more than I've had success. You know, it's just, what are you learning from those failures? So I'm super excited about the NASGD, because again, going through the industry, being an electrician, and then becoming a gas tech, and then getting a gas license, you go through all these different softwares, and everything's geared towards HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. Well, it's
Yeah.
starting to get to the point where generators is its own, and we need to have national codes. We need to have people that are lobbying for it. We need to have best practices so that putting a generator here in Palm Beach County is not completely different than putting it in Dade County or Broward County, So we need to nationalize, standardized processes to make it great. But then on the other side, people who are coming into our industry, they need to withhold the standard really high.
Yes.
And that's my biggest thing, because the businesses that I bought, some of them were really good in time. Sometimes, people are in it too long, whatnot. Some of them were not the greatest, and I think that's one of the issues with, when are you chasing numbers? Are you chasing quality? Are we investing more in the dealerships that really understand how to put these in? Or are we investing in the people that all of a sudden say, I want to be a generator dealership, and they're flying it by the seat of their pants, and they're using subcontractors who are cheap. And we all know cheap is expensive.
I agree. And that's the reason why I created TSSG, right? I went to these conferences for years, and I went and saw other dealers, and I used to shake people's hands. And what's interesting is, like, in my business, we did gas installs for 20 other dealers in our area. And everyone was like so confused about that. It's crazy, man, because I'm a consultant for business, but I do other industries too. And I work with like printers and these other guys, and like they're so just sectioned off, right? Like they won't they won't talk to anybody about anything. They have no best practices, and they won't share any information. They're like afraid you'll go after their customer. They won't even let you go tour their facility. They're afraid you'll take pictures of jobs they're doing and call those people. And I know generator dealers are like that. But the reason I created TSSG is the same reason you guys have your organization. Is I think generator people need our own stuff. We need a little more love, right? I mean, we completely created a computer system, Zuper, that's a dealer management software specifically for generator dealers, So I just want people to understand that who are generator dealers who are listening to this, this industry is growing. This thing is not dying. We might have had a down year maybe for some people, but what it comes down to is you're going to have ebbs and flows. There is a giant market. The equation I've said to you many times is I feel like we're selling AC in the 80s. Maybe everybody doesn't have it yet, but in a couple years, it's going to be ubiquitous in everybody's house, right? So
absolutely,
I just think that the more concentration that we continue to put into the industry, people say to me too, they'll be like, well, you have competition. You got other guys who want to start training people in generators. I'm like, that's great, man. I think there needs to be more, spotlight and more in the industry, right?
My coaches used to say this in college: competition breeds success. And if you want to be the best version of yourself and making sure that you stand out, competition is welcome to me. One of the things we always focused on, and you even know, is our biggest competition was ourselves. I think so many people get so focused on everything else, and I know from relationships, everybody always wants to know, what's Rack doing, and which is great. That's a great feeling. I can tell you this: I don't worry about what they're doing. I worry about what we're doing. Control what you can control, and embrace the uncomfortable, because to me, comfort is a drug that goes undiagnosed. So last year may have been a little uncomfortable for everybody, but it brought out the absolute beast in me and in my managers and the people that are here, because they understand what the goal is. The goal is to be the best. And you see it in the culture. If guys don't kind of fit, guys are like, this guy can't be a part of it. You see the same thing in the office on the sales side. We're tracking every KPI and every metric. And if guys aren't hitting their numbers, if we're not, if it's not good enough, they won't be a part of this program. They won't be a part of this culture. So, generators, I do agree. I mean, with the AI adoption and the AI, whatever is going on with AI and the infrastructure growth of the United States of America, and the grid and the energy, again, this is why I built an energy business, and it just so happens that generators is a part of it, and the biggest part of it. What I would say is, you asked me earlier, is generators was one of those things that I didn't know much about it, but it was just such a small niche that I saw such a great opportunity to create residual income. And that's where people really forget about it. You know what I mean?
Man.
So, but it's complicated. It's a full-on construction project. It's not like you're changing an electrical panel or you're swapping an HVAC. So,
So let me ask you this. I'm gonna ask you for a book recommendation in a second, but kind of the last question that I want to ask you today is, if you were a little guy, right? If you were, today you're a guy who's maybe got a couple hundred service contracts. He's been maybe doing this a couple years. He's in generators now, right? What's your main concentration day to day, every free minute you have? Because I'm going to give you what I think they should be doing, but I'd like to hear from Jesse Rack. If I'm a new guy, I've been doing this a couple of years, I'm trying to grow this business, what should I be concentrating on?
Well, they should obviously be focusing on making sure they have a strong CRM and they have strong processes. These are things nobody talks about, I would say that you're either growing or you're dying. That's the mentality that I have. So you have to set some type of growth goals. You can't do it yourself. You're only as strong as your team. So, whether you're bringing in a strong salesperson, things that I learned, I think there's 3 important components to it. One, it's a strong ownership or strong owner. Then you need somebody that's really talented on the sales side. And then you really need to make sure that your financial person has the ability to handle what's about to come that way, because most people don't. You need to have strong books, because you won't know where the issues are if you can't go into your books on a monthly basis and say, hey, we did really good on this job, but why didn't we do so good on that job? So these are things nobody really teaches you. Get a part of these best practice programs. I always say to you all the time, iron sharpens iron, right? I mean,
yes.
If you want to, when we brought you in, we had a great process. But we needed more coaching. And where I use the term professional development, or building this alliance amongst the dealerships that are still privately owned, whatnot, because most of the big guys don't want to hear they have it all figured out, right?
They got it all figured out.
So, bringing those relationships together, sharing business off of one another, sharing insights off another, meeting vendors that maybe they don't know exist. These are all things that, like, your network is your net worth type deal, and you can see it because you've been there before, and we've done a couple events together, and you see how prideful some of these owners are, and it's almost to their default, because
it's definitely to their default. They
can't get out of their own way.
Biggest issue of their business, right?
They are the biggest issue there, and that's something that I talk to people about all the time with being in a family owned and operated business. And I was fortunate that my dad, again, gave me a great foundation and kind of handed me the reins. He handles what he handles, I handle the rest. And that's not every scenario. So I would just say, utilize the resources around you. Don't be so competitive to the point where you think this is like, we're going to war for electric. I understand. And then also be multidimensional, maybe generators is down. Well, the difference for me is if generators is down, electrical service is up. If generators is down and the cold front comes in, we get 3, 4, 5,000 phone calls. You know what I mean? So just have that infrastructure set up. You're seeing the adoption of AI. AI is going to allow your great employees to take on more work. And it's going to allow you to kind of see where you're having your issues. So I would say that, focus on yourself, but get your goals on paper like I did, like my goal, which was to create an empire and build a brand. It was never to just be, an electrician. I wanted to build a brand like Costco or Home Depot, but I took it one step at a time. My mom has a quote, and she'll love this. It's like a pizza. You can only eat one slice at a time.
Oh, bro, I love it. I say the same thing. I say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
One bite at a time. There you go.
This is what I want to bring up so we can end this thing. And I think this has been fantastic is networking, right? What you just said there. You said, your network is your net worth. And we've heard this many times before. I think for me, with a lot of the small business owners I talk to, they don't understand the necessity of networking personally and professionally. I'm going to tell you, the only reason TSSG is here today is because Dan and I used to go to BNI meetings multiple times a week. We would go to chamber meetings that we weren't even a part of those chambers. We'd show up to coffee and donuts at a brand new business openings, and no one knew who we are. I mean, there's one time we went and you did a ribbon cutting at a gas station. You know what I mean? And it's because we didn't have any business. and we had nothing to do that day. And it wasn't like we were going to sit around and hope stuff came in. You know what I mean? We're out shaking hands with people, and this guy knows this guy who knows this guy who owns a generator company, and this guy's cousin just put in a generator and he's got the card from that guy's company. So we're learning. We were gaining relationships, and most of the business that we had to start with, we still have, years later today. So I think that's why, like, getting in these, networking groups, like something like TSSG Connect or NASGD or any of the, NEGDA, any of these other groups that exist, it's a really good idea to look at those things and say, like, how can I kind of gain more? And what you just said there, Jesse, was absolutely right. If you're not like getting some type of coaching or working with somebody to try to improve yourself, then what are you really doing? Are you growing or are you dying?
Yeah, I mean, we have a philosophy of either grow or die, right? I mean, I have four words on my wall right here. It's aggressive, motivated, growth, next level. That's the philosophy that we are. Call it a sports thing because every year you're losing people and you're replacing people.
Business is sports, bro.
It is. I mean, I think that's why I've been really fortunate and to kind of like put the two parallels together with construction and sports. But what I would say to is nobody, nobody owes you anything. So you better put your back against the wall because you got to go take what's yours,
Oh, amen.
And do it the right way. That's the thing, I mean, you don't have to be, you want to be honorable. The truth is the best lie. We've been through it all. We've sold too many generators. We've had to apologize to people. We didn't hide. We didn't turn the phones off. I've seen it all in my 14-year career doing this. And you got to learn from those mistakes and not make those mistakes twice. That's a key indicator too for a lot of people. But I know you asked me for a book recommendation, correct?
Yes, please.
One of the books I really love is 38 Letters from J.D. Rockefeller to his son. It basically is just letters that John Rockefeller Sr. wrote to his son Rockefeller Jr. Talking about principles and values and business philosophy.
Love it.
That spanned over several decades, and they kind of took over as the oil. They took over everything. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, the letters kind of highlighted a lot of lessons on leadership, and wealth creation, and kind of helped guide his son. And these are things that I started to do for my son, who's 3.5 years old, because things happen, right? I mean, if you think about all the things that happened last year, now that we have this cool technology like phones and computers, you can go back and see all of it. So back in the day, I used to write it all down. For me, I enjoy writing it down. I think it kind of keeps this. It's an exciting thing, and I have a book that I'll give to him when he's ready. When he's 21. Man. When he's 21 years old, and I don't know if it'll be 38 letters or 138 letters, but I think that book kind of spoke to me, and I felt like like the book was legitimately speaking directly to me from all the life experiences that I had brought. And again, when you talk about your network, people, mentors. Sometimes you got to pay to play. It just is what it is,
Yeah, man.
But I always tell people all the time, one of the things I wish I'd have done at a younger age, join that country club,
Yes.
Don't buy that shiny car or buy that Rolex. Join that country club. Join that networking event.
Pay that $1,000, bro.
Invest in yourself.
$1,000. Invest that money in yourself, dude. Jesse, like, it's so funny that a guy like you says that, because I've been to literal places with Jesse where it's like, I didn't even know this place existed. Like, there's a gate that's like behind a gate, and there's some giant building. I'm like, how does this even? Where did this come from, right? And the thing is, it's like you don't start there. You got to start at the bottom. You got to meet the people who have the membership there, and the people who know those people, and the people. And I know you walked in, you go, not only do I come here, I do all the work here. I was like, oh shit, really? Because I know you're there having dinner, giving somebody a card, finding a loose wire, finding a job, So it's like the idea that I want people to kind of get behind is that you don't become a Jesse Rack today or tomorrow. You have to show up every day, right? You've got to just show up. You got to be hustling. You listen to all the mantras this guy has. Listen to all the ways that he talks about the business. This is somebody who focuses on making himself better, right? So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to follow Jesse Rack online. We're going to put up all of his stuff so that you guys can follow him. I want you guys to check out his company. It's called Rack. They have electrical division. They have AC division. They have a bunch of different different stuff. And I also want you guys to make sure that you follow us at TSSG so you can see all the stuff that we're always doing with Jesse and how we've worked with his business in the past. So Jesse, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you talking to us today. It doesn't really get better than this. 38 letters from JD Rockefeller to his son is the book recommendation. And Jesse Rack, you're a wonderful man, a gentleman and a scholar.
Appreciate it, dude. Just trying to leave this trade better than I found it and bring the professionalism back to it, where people look at us like they look at doctors. Because you know what? This world doesn't go around without electric and gas and air conditioning and everything like that. And you're starting to see that. You're starting to see it now. The trades are getting, as I think Birdman said it to Lil Wayne, put some respect on my name, So that's right. And thank you for having me, and definitely follow us. I can share whatever wisdom I can. And, as I continually grow, I hope I can mentor young guys, young family people, that they can grow their business into their, fulfill their vision and their dream like I did.
Thanks, brother.